Well, I thought it was a terrible thing when she ripped up the speech. First of all, it's an official document. You're not allowed. It's illegal what she did. She broke the law.
That was former President Donald Trump speaking about Nancy Pelosi ripping up his State of the Union speech. He believed that that was an illegal maneuver by Pelosi, which is fascinating considering the fact that we've just learned that Trump took official White House documents with him to Mar-a-Lago and they needed to be retrieved from the National Archives. Insane. We also knew back in 2018 that he apparently loved ripping up any documents that should have been archived if he didn't like it, if he wanted whatever issue was being addressed in those documents, if it upset him and he didn't like it, he would rip it up and throw it away. Well, he was breaking the law when he was doing that. But I think this story is a perfect example of how there are certain laws pertaining to people in positions of power that essentially have no enforcement mechanism, no teeth. So let's give you the details on this. So the National Archives and Records Administration went to Mar-a-Lago about a month ago to retrieve official White House documents that Trump took along with him to Mar-a-Lago. He's not supposed to do that. So the Presidential Recovery Act requires presidents to preserve memos, letters, notes, emails, any type of correspondence having to do with official White House duties. Now, Trump advisors claim, look, Trump did nothing nefarious here. In fact, he was actually pretty indiscriminate when he would rip up documents, and the documents that he took along with him weren't a big deal. Well, one senior Trump White House official said he and other White House staffers frequently put documents into burn bags to be destroyed rather than preserving them, and would decide themselves what should be saved and what should be burned. Now, the January 6th committee also asked for certain documents from Trump and his advisors. And oh wow, would you look at that? There were certain documents that they asked for that they couldn't get because they've been destroyed by Donald Trump. So seems like there's more of a problem here than some of his advisors would have you believe. The items included correspondence with North Korean leader Kim Jong Un, which Trump once described as love letters, as well as a letter left for his successor by President Barack Obama.
Okay, so is this a serious issue? Yes, it's not just, hey, National Archives would like to document things a little bit better. No, the question is what's missing. So I'm gonna give you some examples in a second. But Trump has a history of doing this, but his supporters paint it as a positive thing. There's nothing positive about it at all. The reason he has a history of doing this is because he's a lifelong criminal. And that's why he's always tried to get rid of the evidence. That's his MO. He does some sort of paperwork that shows that that might incriminate him. He immediately rips it up. In fact, in the story they explain that if he thought the document was more incriminating, basically, they didn't use the word incriminating, but that was the issue at hand, he would rip it up more times. You'd normally get one rip or two rips. If he thought the document was really bad, he'd rip it up a bunch of times, okay? Right. But even worse yet, if he thought the document was really bad, he would rip it and then pick it back up and put it in his jacket pocket to take home, okay?
You know why? Because his advisors realized that he was breaking the law when he was ripping up documents, so they would retrieve the documents and try to puzzle them back together like a jigsaw. He was probably privy to that, which is why some of the documents he made sure to take along with him.
Yes, and so now if you say, well, he's been doing it his whole life, again, I don't think that's a good thing, I think it's a bad thing. But by law, he cannot rip those documents, right? Now, you might say, well, look, Trump's an idiot, and so he doesn't know the law. That's what supporters would say.
He knows.
Except we just show you the video where he very clearly says he knows that he does it on purpose. And look, there's funny parts of this as to what he's done in the past, which I'll get to in a second. But there's really important parts as it relates to his time in the White House. There was 5 different meetings with Vladimir Putin where we don't have notes, including a 3-hour meeting in Hamburg where he literally snatched the notes away from the translator, the US translator, and took it himself. Now, if you give me those Helsinki and Hamburg meeting notes, we find those, that'll give you all of your answers, right? And by the way, if you're a Trump supporter, I swear to God, if you take those meetings and you find the notes on those, and it turns out he doesn't have any secret deal with the Russians, and there's no property, there's no money exchange, there's no nothing, right? Then I'm done forever and ever and ever with Russia. I'll even apologize and say, because I never thought about the election interference being the big deal. I always said that it was financial interest that he had with Russia. But my guess is the reason he snatches the notes and rips the notes is because there was incriminating stuff, of course.
Right.
And so the fact that we don't have those are deeply problematic.
Right, and keep in mind that there, again, I'm going to repeat, there are certain documents that the January 6th special panel was looking for in order to, be part of their investigation. Those documents are unavailable. But even in a non-Trump situation, the reason why this act is there in the first place is because, well, we as the public deserve to know. We should be able to hold all government officials accountable, including officials in the White House, including the president. And then there's also the problem involving foreign policy. So if there are certain exchanges between the president and world leaders, or certain correspondences in regard to foreign policy decisions, the incoming president needs to be fully informed about it. Those documents are supposed to be available to him so he doesn't kind of come in blind. And so this is a disaster in many different ways. But again, this is yet another example, Cenk, where there might be a federal law, but the federal law has no enforcement mechanism. So they just break the law knowing that there will be no consequences. There will be no consequences for Trump. Let me just get out in front of that and let you know, if you're getting excited about ooh, maybe there are criminal charges. There will be no criminal charges. This law has no teeth. That's the problem.
Yeah, so look, theoretically you can get a 3-year sentence. It's never gonna happen, okay? And they would never do it to the president, and even all the people in charge of enforcement say it's mainly a gentleman's agreement. Even though it is clearly law, it's mainly a gentleman's agreement on the enforcement part.
Ain't no gentleman in the White House.
Yeah, and there's no gentleman there. And they say, and I love when people say with a straight face in the stories, they're like, Trump took these boxes of documents to Mar-a-Lago, and even though he knew he shouldn't take them, and even though he knew he was supposed to return them, and the archives have been telling him and negotiating with him for the return of those documents, he kept them for over a year anyway. Gee, I wonder why. He kept them so he could look through them, find the incriminating ones, and burn them. That's why he brought the boxes to Mar-a-Lago, not to do, I got that trinket from the South Korean leader and I want to just make sure I keep that as a present. No.
I mean, he did want to keep the love letters from Kim Jong Un.
Well, I don't know what he did with those love letters. That's his private business, okay? And I don't know that we want those.
Different folks.
Yeah, well, maybe literally, but he called them love letters, not us, okay? And maybe we don't want those back, okay? But guys, to Anna's earlier point, if, for example, we made a deal with, name any government, the Swedish, the Chinese, the Russians, the next president has to know what's in that deal. So you can't just rip up your notes with a foreign leader, especially one as important as the leader of Russia, and go, don't worry about it, take my word. But I don't even know what your word is because we don't have any of your agreements.
Yeah.
And as I said, there's a hilarious part of this too, as to the type of documents he likes to keep secret, but more details.
So I did want to provide more detail in regard to his staffers having to piece together documents that he had ripped apart. As the Washington Post reports, the archives has struggled to cope with a president who flouted document retention requirements and frequently ripped up official documents, leaving hundreds of pages taped back together, or some that arrived at the archives still in pieces. Some damaged documents were among those turned over to the White House, or to the House Select Committee investigating the January 6, 2021 attack on the US Capitol by a pro-Trump mob. And so I want to talk a little bit also about how common this is. Now, Trump is definitely the top violator of this act, of this law, but apparently there have been problems in previous administrations as well. All recent administrations have had some Presidential Records Act violations, most often involving the use of unofficial email and telephone accounts. Remember, people were very upset at the use of private email servers by Hillary Clinton, and there's a reason for that. White House documents from multiple administrations also have been retrieved by the archives after a president has left office. Now, I wanna go back to the lack of enforcement here and kind of give you the details on what's taking place. So there might be the law, but if there isn't a way to enforce the law is pretty much useless. While the law requires that presidents preserve records related to an administration's activities, the archives has very limited enforcement capabilities. The Presidential Records Act operates on a basis of a gentleman's agreement, as one archives official phrased it. And they spoke to a former counsel to the House of Representatives, and here's what he had to say about this. You can't prosecute for just tearing up papers. You would have to show him being highly selective and have evidence that he wanted to behave unlawfully. So you have to prove intent, which is why it's also incredibly difficult to prosecute a president under these circumstances. And I don't know if this is true. It's his advisor saying it, so take it with a grain of salt, I would argue. But they would argue that, he would indiscriminately rip up papers. But he had a special burn pile.
Yeah, no, there's no question. His advisors are full of crap. The one part that is true, though, I believe them on this, is that he normally rips up papers. He doesn't rip up all papers, but he rips up a lot of papers. That's his habit. But he developed that habit because of all the incriminating things he's done in his life. But as I explained earlier, he would take special care to destroy certain documents. And that is, ironically, well documented. So that's the only thing that is documented. Now here comes a couple of funny parts. First, I want to go to our members who made a couple of great points here. Jumbo Gino wrote in, remember how we weren't supposed to vote for Hillary because she was irresponsible with documents and emails? And that was one of Donald Trump's main arguments against Hillary Clinton. So I love that irony. I love having the smartest audience in the world. Do the show with us, tyt.com/join to become a member, or hit the join button below on YouTube. Dragon with a girl tattoo wrote in, we're lucky he didn't rip up the Constitution and the Bill of Rights as well. Well, he's such a goofball that I bet if he thought of it, he'd be like, oh, yeah, it's okay. The Constitution does not exist anymore. Mike Pence can decide the election. Well, what do you mean? I ripped up the Constitution. There are other copies, Donald. It's not inconceivable that he would think that. Now, though, the funny part, he had his security break into his own doctor's office while he was president and steal his medical files from his doctor.
That wasn't even a big story.
Yeah, I know. It's unbelievable that he did that, and he did so many insane things that almost no one even remembers that story, right?
I didn't want people to see how healthy I am. They would get jealous. I'm the most healthy. No one's healthier than I am.
But guys, think about it. If he wanted a copy of his medical files, he could just ask his doctor, and his doctor will send the medical files. No, he didn't want his own doctor to have a copy of those files. Now, what's in those files? I don't know. It probably shows his either mental decline or the fact that he had nothing to decline in the first place, right? But a guy who's willing to steal his own files from his own doctor, who was shocked by it, right, gives you a sense of what he's willing to do. He also, to this day, hides his transcripts from high school all the way through college. And he says he will sue and try to imprison anyone who tries to find out his grades. Okay, because the guy is pathetic. He thinks he does things wrong all the time, which is very likely true, and doesn't want anybody to find out about it. And the reason he took the stuff home to Mar-a-Lago, and even his advisors basically admit this, is because he thinks he's above the law. He's broken the law. Now the advisors won't admit this.
It seems like he is above the law.
Yeah, he's broken the law so many times that he thinks, I've never gone to jail. I've never had almost any consequences for breaking the law. Why would I care about the law? And I mean, to this day, prosecutors have never made him regret that decision.
But we should also just quickly address the fact that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi ripping up a copy of your speech is not the same as ripping up official White House documents.
There are many other copies of your speech. That was just symbolic. We also are not libs who gave Nancy Pelosi tremendous credit for that.
Right.
That was just nonsense optics, right? Where they were the liberals were like, oh my God, Nancy's so strong. No. Actually opposing his policies is strong. Ripping up paper isn't strong at all, especially when there's a million other copies. The problem with the stuff that Trump ripped up is that there aren't any other copies. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.